Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good day everybody. Today we are going to continue with our today's lesson, Module 8, Our World, Part 2. Please have with you a textbook and your workbook. First of all, before we proceed with our today's lesson, let's look at some words that you need to know. First, noisy. Noisy. Carriage. Carriage. Amusement park. Amusement park. Interesting. Interesting. Circus. Circus. Now, I need you to look at your textbook, page 78. You are going to listen to a story about a city from the past. Before that, let's practice our reading. Please read together. This is a picture of New York City in the year 1900. It was very different then. There weren't any shopping centers or cinemas, but there were shops and theaters. There weren't many cars back then, but there were lots of horses and carriages. The streets of New York City weren't quiet. They were noisy and full of people, just like today. So now you can practice your own reading.
Module 8, Our World, Social Studies.
A city from the past. This is a picture of New York City in the year 1900. It was very different then. There weren't any shopping centres or cinemas, but there were shops and theatres. There weren't many cars back then, but there were lots of horses and carriages. The streets of New York City weren't quiet. They were noisy and full of people, just like today.
Now, let's look at the grammar part before we proceed with today's activity. Let's look at some of these words. First of all, let's read together. There was a theater. There was a theater. This is to show that a place or an object or a person existed in a specific place in the past. That's why it uses was. Okay, so now was is only for one thing, one person or an object. Like in this case, a theater, meaning satu panggung wayang. A theater. So that's why you need to use was. Next, let's look at this part. Let's read together. There were carriages. There were carriages. How many carriages? Many. More than one. So you need to use were. These carriages existed at that specific of time. Okay, we use were. But when you want to write the sentence in the negative form, let's read this example. There wasn't a bus. There wasn't a bus. A bus. How many bus? Only one bus. Wasn't is used to tell the sentence is in negative form and there is only one thing. Got it? Now let's proceed to the last one. There weren't many cars. There weren't many cars. How many cars? More than one. It is in plural form. So we use weren't for negative form. Got it? Were and weren't for plural nouns. Was and wasn't for singular nouns, means one. Okay? Next, let's look at the activity. For this part, you just need to tick the right answer in your textbook, page 79. Read the question. What was there in New York City in the year 1900? Read again Activity 1 and tick. Next, look at Activity 3. For this part, I need you to write on your exercise book, either your writing book or your small exercise book. If you don't have any, you can use a piece of paper. You need to fill in the blanks with were or weren't. Next, Activity 1. Look at your workbook, page 62. First of all, for this activity, you need to read the speech bubble up here. And then you need to decide which one was Mr. Miller's town 80 years ago. Tick one answer. Okay? For this part, just do it in your workbook, page 62. For the next activity, Activity 2. Look at the picture of this town from the year 1900 and write the answers. You need to read this passage and then you need to fill in the blanks with the answers provided up here. Choose the answers wisely. Now, you need to pause this minute to allow you to complete all exercises given to you, because later I will show you the answer. After you have done with all the exercises, you can hit the play button and you can check the answers. Good luck! Now, let's check the answer. For Activity 2, in your textbook, page 79. Let's read the instruction. What was there in New York City in the year 1900? Read Activity 1 and tick. So the answers are shops, C, theater, D, cars, F, and the last one, carriages, G. Let's look at Activity 3. Let's read together and please compare your answer with mine. Look at Activity 2 and write about New York City in the year 1900. Use were or weren't. Number 1. There weren't any shopping centers. There weren't any shopping centers. Number 2. There were shops. There were shops. Number 3. There weren't any cinemas. There weren't any cinemas. Number 4. There weren't any buses. There weren't any buses. Number 5. There were many carriages. There were many carriages. Number 6. There were theaters. There were theaters. Please make sure when you spell the word weren't, it is spelled this way. W-E-R-E-N''T. Once you are satisfied with your answer, you can tick all the answers. Okay? Next, let's look at your workbook, page 62. Let's read together. Activity 1. Which one was Mr. Miller's town 80 years ago? 80 years ago, there weren't any shopping centers in my town. There were only small shops. There weren't many cars, but there were lots of bikes. The streets were quiet. Sometimes there were police officers on horses. There were 2 theaters, but there weren't any cinemas. So the answer is C. Got it? Alright. Activity 2, Workbook, page 62. Let's read together. Look at the picture of this town from the year 1900 and write. Meaning you need to fill in the blanks with the answers given up here. In the year 1900, the streets weren't noisy. They were quiet. There weren't any cars, but there were horses and carriages. There were a few shops and there was a theater too. You can practice your reading on your own. Okay, for the next activity, please look at your workbook, page 63. Let's play. For this part, you need to complete the bubble speech with the answers provided up here. Look and write. Use these words. Let's go through together. Boring, interesting, scary, noisy. When you read the speech bubbles, you need to look at the face expressions and which one applies to these answers. You can try it now. Next, the second activity. Let's play. Look at your workbook, page 63. Read and answer about yourself. For this part, you need to answer based on the words that we have learned throughout in Unit 8. For example, where were you yesterday morning? You can say, I was at the park. You can also say, I was at the shopping mall. You can also say, I was at the library. But you cannot say I was at the home. It is wrong. You need to say places other than home. Okay? So, then for the second part, you need to tell your feeling about going to that place. Look at question number 2. How was it? It was fun. It was interesting. It was scary. It was boring. So you decide. You need to try this one first, and I will show you the answer later. Now, you need to pause this minute to allow you to complete those 2 exercises. Once you have done with it, you can hit the play button and check your answer. Now, let's look together at the answers. Look at your workbook, page 63. Activity 1, let's play. The words given up here are boring, interesting, scary, and noisy. Number 1. How was the museum? How was the museum? It was interesting. It was interesting. Number 2. How was the film? How was the film? The film was scary. The film was scary. Number 3. How was the amusement park? How was the amusement park? It was noisy. It was noisy. And the last one, how was the circus? How was the circus? The circus was boring. The circus was boring. Got it? Next, activity 2. Let's play. Read and answer about yourself. Let's look at some of these answers. And you might have different answers than mine. It is okay to have different answers as long as you use the correct grammar. Let's look at the question. Number 1. Where were you yesterday morning? I was at the circus. You can also say, I was at the library. I was at the cinema. I was at the amusement park. I was at the shopping mall. Okay? Those answers are acceptable. Number 2. How was it? It was boring. It was interesting. It was fun. It was amazing. Got it? Number 3. Where were you yesterday afternoon? I was at the cinema. Number 4. How was it? It was scary. It was fun. It was interesting. So you can choose any answers as long as it does fit the location, that is cinema. Number 5. Where were you yesterday evening? I was at the amusement park. How was it? It was noisy. Okay? Now, I think that's all for today. But before we end with our today's lesson, please make sure you complete all answers, all the work assigned to you. And make sure you snap some photos and upload to our Google Classroom. Before we end for today, let's look at some motivation quote. Let's read together. Train your brain as much as you train your body, because your mind is your biggest asset. Meaning to say, we need to read as much book as we can because knowledge is power. Okay, here are 2 points conclude the motivation quote for today. This is for your information only. First, let's read together. Learn as much as you can because life is short. Next, learn is important for your future. That's all from me. See you next time. Goodbye.